Hello and welcome to your second video for week one. So our first video, we talked about biology and the scientific study of life and what it means to be alive. What are the common characteristics of living things? And then we talked about how biology categorizes and classifies things into different groups of similarities. In this video, we're going to be talking about the scientific method. So just like in the last video, I'm going to assume you've already read the textbook and you've looked through these slides before. I'm not going to go over every slide. I'm just going to go over some highlights and actually mostly just give some examples. So we started last class by talking about what is biology. It's the scientific study of life. So that begs the question, what is science? So we can just go with the root of the word. Science means knowledge. Science means to know. But the thing about science is the power of science lies not in the knowledge it generates, but rather in the methods and discipline by which generates that knowledge. What's that saying? Science is about knowing because of the scientific method. It's the process that we do science that makes it science. So we're going to talk about the fact that the key thing for the scientific method are two things that I like to think of as the two keys of the scientific method being the hypothesis and doing an experiment. So really we're going to spend most of our time just on this slide. So what are the steps of the scientific method? This is what makes science, in my opinion, beautiful, and it's what makes science totally different than history or humanities, which are all also studying what it means to know things at different levels. But to knowing things in biology and in science involves this specific method, where you first are observing. You're observing the world. You're looking at the things around you and you're seeing something and you're coming up with a hypothesis. So step one, observation. Step two, hypothesis. And what a hypothesis is it's a testable statement. It's you see something and you're then going to do an experiment. So you have an observation, you have a hypothesis, you make a statement that you can test, and then this is the key, is you do the experiment. You do the experiment and then you come up with a conclusion, deciding was I right and was I wrong? And then you start all over again. So we're going to give some examples. Observation. Say you wake up in the morning and your light doesn't turn on. So you think, make a hypothesis. Your hypothesis again is testable. My hypothesis is that I think my power is out in my house. So I now have a hypothesis. My lamp didn't turn on is my observation. My hypothesis is that there's no power in the house. I'm going to go do an experiment. I'm going to go walk around and see, does any of the other lights in my house work up? Oh, that's my experiment. Then I'm going to do a conclusion saying I walk into the kitchen, the lights turn on. My hypothesis was wrong. The house has power. I can then change that hypothesis and thinking, is it that outlet? Or maybe it's the light bulb. But all of these hypotheses are going to have an experiment, are going to be something that I can test one way or the other. That then I can make that conclusion, do I need to change that hypothesis? So I'll give you some other examples, scientific method in this area of COVID. We have an observation that there's a deadly virus that is killing people. We know it's a respiratory virus. People assume that first hypothesis that it's going to be super important. It's the particles that you're spitting out, and it's the large it's the large spit that has a lot of virus that people can pick up from other surfaces and get infected. So we can do the experiment and we can see, is that correct? Is that the major form of transmission based on people picking up other viruses? Looking at the data, we can make a conclusion, no, that's wrong. We can make a new hypothesis that it's more aerosolized and something that's going to be very important to reduce the spread of the coronavirus is going to be wearing masks. We can do the experiment, unfortunately, of seeing, does adherence to masks make a difference? And we are now making the conclusion we can see in the data from the rate of transmission, from the rate of hospitalizations, that wearing masks makes a difference. We can make that conclusion. This is the process of the scientific method. It involves changing what you are thinking, how something is working, based on data. It's all about doing an experiment to test what you think happens and then making that conclusion. So that is the beautiful scientific method that makes biology and science different from all other disciplines. You know something not because you think it, but because you have the data to show that that's why you think it. And so all of this we call for the scientific method. We call these theories. Now, a scientific theory isn't something that's, oh, it's just my idea, but it's based on conclusions of the scientific method tried and tried and tried again. So a theory is when many observations come together. Um, so that's really overall the scientific method. One thing I didn't want to mention was doing those experiments. How you do the experiment is really, really important. In the lab, even though it's virtual, we're going to be learning about the importance of control groups and making sure that when doing a study, it's a good study and that you're only changing one variable so that you can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges so that the conclusion you make is appropriate. But we're going to be doing some more things in the lab to sort of get a better idea for that. And then one thing that I really like for this picture that wasn't included in this one is also the really important, this is a joke diagram, but it's this idea of then you make your conclusion and you publish your results. You need to get the conclusions out to the broader public so that everyone is understanding what scientific breakthrough you made. So there are some more slides that are more specifics on this. But again, I want you to be going through those on your own, and then we can discuss them in our weekly sessions or in an open study time that you can schedule with me. So with that, we are finished with material for week 1.